Alrighty, guys. Welcome to Talkin Wellness. We are here with the gang. It's your boy Mike's.
Kayla.
Oh,
We did
ladies
it again.
first. Ladies first. It's
We
okay.
did it again.
Kayla here.
And Christian. We're trying to get better at that.
Yeah, it's okay.
We all want to talk. We love doing this.
If you haven't noticed.
So today, what we are bringing to you guys is cancel culture. We have a lot of important topics to bring together. I know Chris knows a little bit more about the structure of today's episode, but I do know we were talking about cancel culture. So Chris, if you want to...
For sure. So before actually we get into all this wonderful topics, so last week we told you guys about a goal that we're trying to hit by the end of the year. We finally reached 1,000 viewers. Now we're at 1.5, guys.
I saw that. What?
It's going phenomenal. But we are super close to our 50 subscribers by the end of the year goal. We are literally, I think last time I checked, 5 away. So please tell your friends about it. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet on our YouTube channel. We really want to hit that goal. It's like something we really strive for when we started this podcast, and it's like closer than ever. So now we're like, let's do it, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But we really appreciate the support, and we really appreciate all the love you've given us. Please keep commenting, especially in today's episode. I feel we're going to get a couple comments.
Yeah, very controversy.
Because we're talking about controversy today. We're talking about cancel culture. So it has a lot of definitions. It has a lot of different perspectives. The way I see it, at least, is the idea of essentially barring someone essentially from the internet, or like removing, throwing a lot of hate on someone, or taking them out of the internet, or firing them, whatever, removing a certain amount of elevated power or elevated status because of a comment or a action that they did in the past. This can
Almost
be
like outcasting, right?
pretty
Like
much. It's essentially outcasting. It is for people in a certain status. It could be literally like removing that power away by firing them, or by taking away their position, or by putting somebody else instead. Or for regular common folk, it can literally be somebody just getting a lot of hate for opinion.
Or unfriend that person. You can't be friends with them.
Correct, yeah. So there's a lot of perspectives on the topic. I know we all have our own personal definitions on it, our own personal opinions on it. I think, what are you guys' definition of cancel culture?
I mean, do we have an actual definition, or no? There wasn't like an actual.
We can look for one, but
I
what
can
do you
pull
think?
out-
Yeah.
pull one
No,
up.
I mean, I have my own. I wanted to, have something to go off of.
Right.
But I guess my definition of cancel culture, it's essentially censorship, isn't it? It's censoring someone, censoring something, whatever it is, based on what they are or what they're deciding to do, or for whatever reason, wherever the reason, whoever's censoring them. So I'm very anti-censoring, no matter what it is. I'm very pro free speech. I mean, we're all Americans. I think that's important, cornerstone as in our country, to stand by that. There's a few laws that I think we're losing, and I think that's definitely one of them. So I think it's important to be able to accept what people have to say, even if you don't agree with them. So I think free speech is super important. We need to find a way for us not to be censored as much, but I don't think that's going to happen with social media, with big business. These are the people that are essentially censoring, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's levels of cancel culture too, right? Is what people are being canceled for, or like what that looks like. But just a quick Google search said, for those of you who aren't aware, cancel culture refers to the mass withdrawal of support from public figures or celebrities who have done things that aren't socially accepted today.
Very similar to what Chris was saying.
Yeah.
As well as
Yeah.
you with the outcasting.
This practice of canceling or mass shaming often occurs on social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. So before we get into the controversy, though, I wanted to just highlight how this is going to kind of tie into our topic of, we always want to focus on wellness. So we're going to talk about cancel culture, but we're going to tie it into some key recovery concepts. And those key recovery concepts that we have today are hope, personal responsibility, education, support, and self-advocacy. So although the theme of today's episode is cancel culture, we're going to touch on the key recovery concepts within that theme of cancel culture.
Correct.
So,
Yeah. And I think it's perfect. It perfectly connects, because in some way, shape, or form, cancel culture affects anybody's wellness.
Yeah.
Can it affect the person who's getting canceled or the person who has strong feelings towards the certain person being canceled, whether it be positive or negative feelings. So I, for example, to share a little bit, I don't necessarily condone cancel culture. I know a lot of people in my social circles and a lot of people in my life would look at me kind of weird for stating that, mainly because I feel that a lot of my friends see me as a person so I consider myself as a person who doesn't like to share a lot when it comes to politics because or any controversial topic, because I don't want people to feel uncomfortable around me or to feel offended around me. However, I am a big fan of comedy, stand-up comedy specifically, and even though I'm not a stand-up comedian, because I watch so much of it, I kind of consider myself part of the community, right?
Yeah.
And part of the community, a lot of comedians as well as a lot of viewers of comedy will all agree with me in saying that cancel culture can sometimes be a very overstressed situation. For example, I remember not so long ago, James Gunn, he directed the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He got completely taken away from Guardians of the Galaxy 3 for some comments he made 10, 15 years ago on Twitter. Are those comments right? No, sure. However, the fact that he was being penalized 15 years later
Wow.
because Disney was afraid that the masses would be offended and not go pay money to watch Guardians of the Galaxy 3 when it was his child. Literally, he worked on the first two movies. He poured so much. The team behind the movie supported him. The actor supported him on it, and it became a whole controversy.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that, because obviously, although I do condone the idea that we should respect one another, I personally don't think that censorship is a responsible thing that we need to do it's a responsible thing for us to do as a society, because at the end of the day, a lot of us who are in this comedy world, whether it be stand-up or whether you enjoy it, we use comedy to cope with the negative feelings that we feel every day. A lot of people I forgot who it was. I think I forgot exactly who said it, but there was a comedian that said once that it's a blessing and an honor, the fact that we can joke about it, because so many people can't do that. It's a blessing and an honor, the fact that we understand that it's a dark situation or something bad happened. However, the only way we can cope with these horrible feelings, instead of thinking oh my God, it's the end of the world, what are we going to do now, is by making a joke about it, right? And I understand that a lot of people have different opinions on that when it comes to respect and when it comes to being offended, and I don't want to offend anybody who might be listening or watching this episode. However, I personally am from the world that making fun of something doesn't necessarily mean disrespect. For example, I can joke about you, Mike. I can see a joke about, let's say, I'm not saying that this is an honest joke, but let's say I make fun of your hair, for example. Does that mean that I love you any less, or that I don't respect you?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't mean that at all. It's just simply a joke to kind of connect us as
I don't
friends.
know. Mike looks pretty mad over there. No, I'm just kidding.
Dang it, I lost a friend. I'm canceled now.
I think that's the issue, though, is that people are so quick to be offended, right? It's like this climate in society where everyone is so offendable, by
Defensive,
so
yeah.
easily, and it doesn't allow us to be human, because to me, that sends a message of okay, you will be canceled if you don't act perfectly to what is socially acceptable in society at every time, all times, even 15 years ago when you may not have been well and 15 years ago, I was not in my best right mind. And if somebody was to bring up, a comment that I left on, back then it was MySpace, right? And I'm sure that there was some crazy stuff on MySpace you could pull up from me, and bring it back into today's time, 15 years later, and be like, all right, you're fired. We're going to remove everything that you've built over the whatever, all the hard work you've done. No matter how good it is, because 15 years ago, you made this comment on this day that I was able to pull on the internet, because the internet is a blessing and a curse in that way, where it's all there, It's
such an interesting topic, because 15 years is definitely a long time. We have literally laws that if you murder someone, it's been 10 years. You can't try them.
Yeah.
What is that called?
I forgot.
Liberty, Statue of Liberty, or statue of something.
Yeah, the Statue of Liberty is the actual.
Yeah, not
statue.
that.
You're like, wow, Lady Liberty got a history.
Statue of something. I forgot. But anyways, so like the fact that you can go back 15, 20 years into someone's life and kind of alter everything is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But at the same extent, if someone's done something that's
Right.
extremely bad, which we've seen a lot of cases
Correct.
with the
Yeah.
R wording and
Yeah, with the
sexual abuse, pedophilia, different things that are
Absolutely.
going on, I have absolutely no issues because I'm a firm believer like people like that are always going to be that person. They're just kind of evil people deep down,
Yeah.
and they can hide it really well. So
yeah.
it's a touchy balance
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
of
that's the levels,
censorship.
right?
Yeah.
Of cancel culture.
But it is censorship at the end of the day, and that's something that I don't agree with. So like with saying that, like I don't think that they should be allowed to whatever. I would, if I had to vote one way and it had to be definitive, I would say that you shouldn't be able to cancel anyone. If that means that a few people like that get through, then it happens.
Right, but I think that also brings the question that we need to ask is it ever valid? For example, like Kevin Spacey, is that his name? Yeah, Kevin Spacey, who got caught and went to trial for pedophilic tendencies, right? And he got completely canceled from Hollywood. No one wanted to hire Kevin Spacey ever again. Is that valid for that reason? Compared to like Kevin Hart, who was not allowed to host the Oscars because of a tweet he made 10 years ago. Like I although I don't like cancel culture, I do think that there's a certain amount of responsibility, that self-responsibility that everybody needs to have as well.
Yeah.
How there is a line. I think that, especially if you're someone who is a celebrity or who is a person who impacts a lot of people, especially a lot of young people, like comedians, for example. I've been a fan of comedy since I was like 10.
So I have a question for you. So let's say if there's a cancel situation between two people, and let's say, initially they probably wanted that person to be canceled, and then afterwards they realize, like, this is too severe. I don't want this happening to this person. Like, how do you go about that? And I'm going to bring a specific situation. Let's say the Rihanna-Chris Brown situation, right? They were both wrong in these parts. Rihanna has admitted to hitting Chris Brown before he touched her. Not saying he's right. You should never lay your hands on a woman. He
Agreed.
destroyed her face. And that got him into a lot of trouble. Canceled him for a long time. He's still a massive star, and it's because of the amount of talent he has, but he could have been a way bigger star than he is now if that wasn't for that situation. So, like, let's say a situation like that where she says, like, present day now that I wish it wouldn't have went that way. I wish he wouldn't have gotten that stuff. I wish the story was, been a little bit more equal. What do you think about situations like that? It's such a weird situation for me.
In those specific situations is always, I mean, at the end of the day, violence against anybody is wrong,
Oh,
in my
Right.
of
opinion.
course.
Mm-hmm.
I agree 100%.
And in that kind of situation, it is hard. I don't necessarily think canceling either of them is the go-to.
But-
When there's been
and
reports.
and why I asked is because Chris Brown was canceled, Rihanna was not, but they both had equal actions in the party, and
Correct.
that's why I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
Well-
you have a lot of situations like that where both parties will do very similar things. They'll be both equal in the consequence, but only one person will get reprimanded for it, and that's why I'm saying, like,
Right.
that's a big
Well, it
issue.
comes
Do you think
back-
it's because there has to be like a hero and a villain type of ordeal? In
I think so.
Hollywood?
I think the Johnny Depp and
That's what I was thinking
and
of, the
Amber Heard
Johnny
thing
Depp.
proves that theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that we all condemned Disney hated Johnny Depp. Everybody hated Johnny Depp until we
The truth
found
came
out.
out.
And the truth came out. I was like,
and that actually showed
"Oh."
me that it wasn't. It's not always even a feminine, masculine thing, because there were a lot of supporters for Johnny Depp as well. So, like, and that's one thing I want to make clear. It's not a masculine, feminine thing for me at
No,
all.
it's not-
I don't
it's
think
not.
that's why these things get chosen as far as like sides. I just think some person or whatever always gets like the short stick in those situations, and it's just a weird situation. I don't know how you would go about those levels of.
I think it comes back to the key recovery concepts because we need to get educated. I
Right.
think before we
That's a
make
great point, yeah.
any opinion on anything, in order to to make an opinion that it needs to be based on some form of education, whether it be you research the topic, whether it be you know all the facts.
Yeah.
Like, I can't say that I dislike or even hate someone if I don't know the entire story.
Absolutely.
And we
I'm
have
fully on
but
that.
let's be real too, is like, education sometimes doesn't mean getting on social media, and because there's so much
Propaganda.
Right.
and so like people jump on a bandwagon before they really even have sought out the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's hard, and that's kind of the culture that we live in anyways, because you see it so much. It's like one little thing, and it could be a complete lie, like a
Yeah.
complete lie.
I mean, look at Republicans versus Democrats, Israel versus Palestine. There's so many situations where it's them versus them, cops versus Black Lives Matter. Like, it's never a situation where it's understanding their perspective, understanding their perspective.
Right, and
it's
finding
just them
some,
versus them.
right, yeah.
Right.
And that's the cancel culture, though. Like, that is cancel culture, where it's like, we're gonna
Each side has their army, their news anchors, and their news anchors are going at it. That's the
Yeah.
cancel culture of each side going at each other.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. It's kind of crazy, but
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of the problem. But at the same time, I think it's important to kind of have a conversation on, well, what can we do to kind of like start combating cancel culture. I think we need to start cultivating a mentality of respect, whether that be respecting the fact that you might not know the information, whether it be respecting the fact that whether it be respecting the fact that you are allowed to have a different opinion than mine.
right, and other people are allowed. No same person is going to have the same opinions on everything, right? And that's like humanity. And there was a time where like Democrats and Republicans could sit at the same table and have conversation. There was a time where, this person and this person can come together. And I don't know when, I think it's been more in the most recent years, like maybe over the past like 5-10 years, that it's become such
social media
controversy. Yeah, right? Social media, where it's like, if you believe this and I believe this, we can't be friends. Like, I'm going to discredit and disregard you completely because I'm a Republican and you're a Democrat.
Yeah. And speaking about time, I'll be the first one. I'll snitch on myself. When I was in my first years of college, I was that person. Especially when the Black Lives Matter thing happened. I picked a side.
you're taught to be that way.
Yeah, I picked a side, and I remember there's a friend of mine who did not agree with me, and it became a problem of constant arguments.
Do you mind if I ask what was the?
Well, I was a supporter. I was supporting
Black Lives Matter?
Black Lives Matter. He was not.
And what race were they? If you don't mind me asking, I just want like the context.
Sure. He was white,
Oh, okay.
California native. I am a Puerto Rican Latino, and we had our fair share of arguments and our fair share of different opinions on the subject. But it ultimately landed on the fact that I couldn't respect the fact that his opinion was so vastly different than mine. And it took me a long time of self-studying, personal responsibility, education, and honestly, a little bit of hope too, to kind of understand that, it's okay that my friend doesn't share the opinions that I share.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, those beliefs don't make him his person. Like, he is his own individual with these personal beliefs. And it took me a long time to realize that, funny enough, I was part of the problem too.
Yeah.
Sure.
But we're constantly evolving as humans, right?
Yeah.
And so with that aspect, knowing that like you may sit with somebody with a different opinion as you, but that doesn't mean that through that experience of, I love debates with my friends, like talking about different perspectives. And that's taken maturity to be able to sit with somebody and like work through their thought process, me work through my thought process, and we learn from each other.
Yeah.
And that's the most detrimental thing I think about cancel culture that you just said is it doesn't give people the ability to learn.
Yeah.
You have celebrities that are, they're put in fortunate places because of, their talents or whatever. And, they make one tweet 5 years ago or whatever, and their whole career can be ended. And I don't think that's completely fair. I think you should accept responsibility and understand that you're at a place and people are following you and you have a following and influence.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you shouldn't judge people for being human, being vulnerable, making mistakes, and not giving them the ability to change. And I think that's a massive issue in censorship.
Well, I kind of I also want to challenge you a little bit and
Yeah.
flip that coin, because I do think that there's a certain amount of personal responsibility and
Absolutely.
accountability that all these higher people need to be held on sometimes. Because although I understand that comedy in and of itself shouldn't be censored, when you're downright making fun of someone and it comes from a perspective of downright hate,
Yeah.
that should be something we talk about and be like, hey, I understand you have an opinion about that, but
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean you have to voice it
And
out
that's
loud
one
like
thing that fortunately I think we definitely do nowadays as a country, as a society. If someone's doing something that's blatantly hateful and they're at a well-known status, they're going to be found out very quickly these days.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I can absolutely agree with, because it's not right. There's boundaries. There's boundaries in everything. There's boundaries in bullying. There's boundaries in whatever. So it really is about what's the boundary for that person, what's the boundary for other
Right.
society,
Yeah.
and we need to find a way about
Yeah.
holding that.
So
you
there's
know?
validity, right? So I believe that there is validity in some people being removed from whatever status they have,
Yeah.
depending on what the intention of that person and what they're putting out there and the harm that they may be causing. Now, I think as a society, we've taken that to such a degree that people are being canceled for like the dumbest things, and that's not fair. I don't think that people should be held accountable to like simple like human error, right? That's like, man, if I can't judge myself and say that I've made a mistake like that, then sure, right? Like, he who has not, whatever.
Cast a stone,
cast a stone, So it's like kind of taking that to a degree, because at the end of the day, it can become bullying on that person depending on what they did or what they're being held accountable to and how much of it is true or taken out of context.
That is another massive point. How many times do we get the other side of the story? That's not kind of what I was bringing up with the Chris Brown thing. How many times do you get the other side of the story when it comes to censorship?
Yeah.
Most times we're literally just censoring that person. We have no perspective of that person or why they're being censored.
Well, literally, to kind of come back on the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing, like he was completely taken out of Hollywood. Like Pirates of the Caribbean movies were, and I hate how
he still is almost.
Well, here's the thing: I hate sometimes, or I guess hate is a strong word. I strongly dislike how Disney handles things like this, because you can tell they do it to kind of like calm down the fire, when they don't personally believe in these things. For example, he was completely taken out of Disney. Projects for Pirates of the Caribbean were completely canceled. They were even going to put somebody else on they were thinking about putting Margot Robbie in it, just completely switching out, rebooting. And then the trial happened, and then we started finding out like all this crap,
truth, right?
the truth about Amber Heard and her tendencies and the help that she needs in terms of like mental health and all that. And then Disney was like, oh, sorry, we're just going to make 2 more Pirates of the Caribbean movies. This is what you want, people. So I also think that companies and big,
Did they apologize?
No, they're
See,
not
like,
going to apologize.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to do something like that to that degree, you're wrong. You want to cancel people. Where's your apology?
No, they don't need to apologize because they're the corporate. I mean,
know,
this as a
that's
joke.
annoying. I know.
So the way they apologize is by giving him 2 movies. Okay, you're going to start in 2 more Pirates of the Caribbean movies, which is not an apology. It's just putting a Band-Aid over a broken bridge. It's like it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't change that.
I love Disney, but that's probably one of the most corrupt companies of all time.
And don't get me wrong, other companies are following suit.
Yeah.
Because now we all collectively said, wow, it's messed up what Amber Heard did. Oh, wow, it's messed up. She definitely needs to go get mental health. But now she's being canceled, and she's like completely being taken out of the new Aquaman movie. So Warner Brothers is doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's wild. It's like,
so it's like, again, whether you, I agree that she did wrong, and I agree that
she's being canceled, but he was going to go to prison for multiple years.
Correct.
So the degree of cancel is a lot different.
Right. And now it's happening again with Jonathan Majors Jonathan Majors, is that his name? Yeah. In Marvel, the guy who played Kang the Conqueror. Like, they were going to do this whole thing, but it came out that he was abusive towards women, and now they have to change the whole thing. They don't know what's going to happen because there's still a trial.
I'm all about that, though, man. I think if you have a past of being, like I said, I think you should learn from your past, but if you have this past of abusing people and it seems like you're not making any change, I'm all for these people not getting any opportunities in life, because there's so many good people in life that deserve these opportunities.
Yeah.
I don't think people that just because they have a pretty face or whatever, they attract this role, they should be given a God-given opportunity when they're doing things like
Well,
this.
yeah, power
you know?
and corruption will be until the day we die,
Exactly,
So
yeah.
there's people out there doing it. When those things are revealed, I do think there should be consequences. However, I also am a firm believer that people change. Why? Because I am a changed woman here today. And so it's really an individual case by case. I don't think that people should ever be put on just like, this is a standard, and
They'll
for
never
any,
change, yeah.
Right. Or just even that for this little thing, we're going to hit them with this, and for this big thing we're going to hit them with this, and it's the same, we're hitting them with the same type of consequences, but what's been done is very like a tweak compared to like I'm abusing people for years and years and still doing it is very different.
Right. Yeah. So at the end of the day, and I know that there's probably a lot of people listening who might now even be offended by some of the comments that we're making. I want to challenge you to just try to have a little bit of a mental switch in the sense of like, well, the fact that we're sharing an opinion doesn't make your opinion any less valid.
Correct.
No, of course.
In the same way that, we don't think that your opinion is any valid, we ask that you respect that our opinion isn't any less valid, because at the end of the day, we cannot continue to live in a world where somebody advocates for something they're going through, or they express an opinion on something, and our immediate reaction is, no, you're wrong.
What if their opinion is wrong? Like they have an opinion on something that's just not right.
Well,
like,
then
it's
you
just
would
wrong as hell.
Seek to understand. Well,
Education.
tell me where that comes from. How did you come up with that?
Fair.
Right?
I'm trying to think
Understand
of like an actual, situation.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. When you start applying the wellness tools, the key recovery concepts, when you start, and that's something that I enjoy, that I like about are those wellness recovery topics that can really hone in on a lot of these controversial topics. At
Right.
the end of the day, what's your outlook on this specific topic when it comes to hope, when it comes to personal responsibility, when it comes to education, support, stuff? Are you advocating for yourself, but at the same time, are you supporting that person by listening?
Right.
Are you educating yourself by saying, understanding, like, I don't think that's right. Let's find more information together. Are you taking personal responsibility for yourself, making an educated guess? You yourself, before any argument starts, make sure you have all the facts.
Right. And even a personal responsibility of like how this opinion impacts me and why, right? Is like, that's the self-reflection. So if somebody says something and I do feel defensive or I'm offended, why, right? Like, and asking myself, like, why do I feel that way? And it's those types of things that bring hope, because we can all come together and have different opinions. Like, we all have different perspectives on a lot of different things, but that's what makes us have really great conversations. And I learn so much from you guys and just the conversations that we get to have. And that's hopeful for me, right? Is that like, I can sit with somebody from a totally different background, totally different, color, race, whatever. We can come together, different raisings, upbringings, different ideology, different belief systems, and we can have really awesome conversations and we learn from each other.
Yeah, and I think this is the perfect example of what that could look like, because the fact that us three are sitting here, just so you guys know, we share a lot of very different beliefs on very different things, right? But the fact that we're here having these conversations week to week illustrates how this could look like if we just tried our best to just really identify, okay, if this offended me, let me, before I just start screaming at someone, really identify, well, why do I feel like this? And it's something that I'll be, like I said, I've had to work on for a very long time. It stems from a fact of like the need to be right all the time. Now having to check that moment, catch it, check it, change it, right? I love that motto that we have here, catch that idea. Why am I feeling this way? Check it and change it to a positive behavior, instead of arguing with someone and be like, well, let me listen to what you got to say. And if I don't like it, I'm still going to give you the respect of listening.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's how most people are. They kind of just sit there until they have the opportunity to speak instead of actually listening. And that's why a lot of things don't actually get reciprocated in most conversations.
Yes. Oh, that happens
so much.
Most people are not, and I say most, and I'm probably like 70% of people, I would say, are just not receptive to like just listening to people for a good amount of time and actually wanting to hear them.
Yeah.
Other than trying to get something out of them. Like people just don't want to listen to other people. They don't care about other people. They don't naturally just want to talk to people. And I could say I'm guilty of that as well. Obviously I have my social media and I don't want to always talk to people, but when I'm having a conversation with people or with someone that's new and it's my first impression with them, I always want to give them the ability to like express who they are and not feel as if I'm like thinking something or I'm judging them or anything like that, and vice versa. And I think that's the best platform to have a great friendship or great dialogues or great debates or whatever it is. And that's exactly what we're doing here. You know, we all have different perspectives. I think we think similar on a lot of things, but at the same time,
sure.
but we think a lot different on a lot of things as well.
Yeah.
And that's everyone.
The strength of us, though, is that, though.
Yeah,
is the
exactly.
differences.
But I think a lot of humans are like that. I think I was joking with my brother the other day, and he sent me a bunch of ADHD stuff that other people were posting, and it's like, and he's like, "This is just us," and I'm like, "We really aren't that unique." And what I meant by that is like, yeah, obviously we have traits that maybe not everyone goes through, but a lot of humans are very similar, and if we learn to realize that and be like, this guy's very similar to me, he just might have a different perspective or an upbringing or a different opinion on this particular subject. Maybe we don't necessarily disagree. I can get to there, but you need to be open-minded, and that's
Right.
the biggest thing. Most people aren't open-minded.
Yeah. And you know what?
I struggle too.
To kind of add to that a little bit, understanding people's background too. You know,
Yeah.
for example, I come from a Latino background.
Yeah.
Where in Latin America, in general, sharing your opinion on something is not normal.
Yeah.
Right.
And you get completely and utterly bombarded by your family. And I feel that a lot of people, even in America, can agree with that. You know, especially I have a friend from high school who shared with me their coming out story, you know, and how their family was completely anti that. And like they like basically said, you need to move out. It was like a whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's a clear example of generational trauma, you know, that like I can't have a different opinion than you need to believe what this family believes, and if
Yeah.
you don't, you're out of here, you know.
And that's cancel culture right there, right? Like,
Correct.
you're not...
In the house, in the
Yeah.
home, it can happen too.
that-
Like everybody
yeah. Cancel culture happens on, like, obviously we talk about celebrities.
And that's what
but-
we should jump into next. Obviously, like you're saying, celebrities are the main thing that go to our brain when we think cancel
But
culture.
how much does it
high
happen
influence
on a
people.
basic level?
How often does it happen to you?
Yeah.
Does it happen to you,
Yeah.
me? Like every day, this could happen to us, but we
Yeah.
don't really realize that. So I want to ask you guys, like, what's a specific like anecdotal experience that you guys have that may have happened to you, or you feel cancel culture affected you, or you really saw it on a personal level, like someone close to you? If you can think of one.
Sure.
It's like a hard question, but
Well, I
sorry.
shared the Black Lives Matter.
Oh yeah,
one.
that's right.
But trying to think further back, I can recall a time where I had arguments with a person. This was back in middle school, who was constantly trying to test my faith. Like, why do you believe in God? Why are you a Christian? And it got to a point where I was like, I was just arguing with him. Like, how could you not believe? You're dumb for not believing, you know, instead of like taking the time to like listen and be like, no, you know, he has an opinion and that's valid. But at the same time, this happened the other way around, where it was like he was arguing with me. He was screaming at me for having an opinion on something. And it became a whole thing about, you know, not being respectful towards each other. Personally, in Latin America, for example, I don't want to share too personal because there's other people involved who you know, I want them to share their perspective if they're given the chance. But there's somebody in my life who, whenever I've had arguments with them, they kind of like take it on the hand of like, well, that's dumb, so I don't think you're right. Where that's not validating, that's not respecting someone's opinion. That is ignoring someone's opinion and completely disrespecting them.
Yeah.
You know, instead of having the thought of like, well, I don't agree, but I guess you have a point. You know, that's you can have that perspective. I just don't agree with it. You know, that's a different perspective than you're dumb for believing in that, right? That's automatically shows a great example of like how cancel culture can affect us in our lives. You know?
Absolutely.
When your brother or your cousin or your parents or somebody in your life shares an opinion and you're like, you're dumb for believing.
Yeah, I was
going
gonna say that could be one of the most hurtful things that can happen to you.
Yeah,
you know, to a person. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially coming from someone close to you, like you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is what happened with my friend in college, is that the fact that he and I were buddies for a long time, and all of a sudden he was sharing these things that were like so vastly different from what I thought, you know, and it really hurt me.
Yeah.
Instead of understanding that, no, it's okay that he has these beliefs. Just because you don't agree doesn't change the person that
If
he
anything,
is.
it was important that like he saw you as a good friend to share those things with you. You know,
That
if
too.
he did think that you, Because let's think about this. How easy is it to share your opinions and your perspectives and your experiences and everything with people that are exactly like you?
Right.
When you meet someone
Ooh,
that's
there you go.
completely opposite to you, and it's almost awkward when you're in the room together, how hard is it to have a conversation and actually really let your walls down?
Mm-hmm.
But that's what you're truly going to learn the most from yourself and from the other person.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, and it's uncomfortable.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
But that's where all the growth happens.
Yep.
Because I can relate in the sense of I've definitely have had that experience with like my faith in Christ, right, and just being kind of disregarded because of that. I've also like in recovery, I started in like a community of recovery that was like a 12-step fellowship. And when I transitioned out of that space because I was following my faith in Christ, there was a little bit of that aspect. And I think a lot of it also came from the fear of like, oh, well, we believe this one way, and because you're outside of the box of what we believe, like we have to stay away from you. And that to me is that like not having an open mind about things. It's just saying like, I see this and we don't agree with this because we only know this way, so we're just going to kind of disregard you a little bit. But that kind of changed because like my character didn't change, and I was actually doing really well in my journey, even with my choice that I had made and my beliefs and how they started to grow. And so then some of those individuals, they had a change of heart. And thank God that I was able to keep that open. And it's because I understand sometimes that people think a certain way out of, they've just been indoctrined, right? Like it's their belief, and they don't know anything different, and they may be afraid to think outside of that box. And I've been there before, right? Like I've been there where I thought like one certain way, but I've learned to become so much more open-minded because everything about like the areas in my life that I've grown has been like thinking outside the box, allowing other perspectives. Not that I have to agree, but seeking to understand, to say, just because I hear a thought and it's not one that, I naturally would think or that I've heard or whatever, doesn't mean I need to disregard it. It just means like educate yourself, find out a little bit more. And so I feel like when we do that, it changes the way that we see people, how we, deal with people, how we communicate, and all of those things.
And how they receive you too. One of the like people that I least like to be around are people that are like, of course, not open-minded, but they think they have the answer for everything. And then when you have a perspective about something, it's almost like as soon as you say that, you're like, no, actually, this is why this happened. It's like, those are the worst people sometimes. It's like, bro, you are always right. Your perspective is always the one, but no one else can actually think another way. And that's so harmful to be as a person. But I meet so many people like that. It's crazy.
So yeah, to kind of start wrapping up, I kind of want to end on a hopeful note, though.
Sure.
We've talked about all these recovery topics, but hope is the one that I really think we should end with. At the end of the day, I think there's a lot of hope and respect.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of positive things that can happen in our world if we choose respect over hate, over, and this goes for whatever argument, whether you're on one side or the other side, right? Because, when we start really analyzing people's opinions on something, whether it be because it comes from a place of hurt, of pain, whether it comes from a place of confusion, whether it comes from a place of miseducation, or simply when it comes from a place of just having a different opinion than you, because I don't necessarily agree with that. All that should be valid, and all that should be respected, in the sense that if it's not actively hurting someone, then I think everybody has a right to an opinion. Now, in terms of cancel culture, do I agree that celebrities and CEOs and all these things have a certain responsibility in terms of like what they say and what they do? Sure. But at the end of the day, I think there's a difference between being able to say an opinion versus doing something that's just morally wrong. Right? There is a difference. And I think as a society, we need to be aware of that. And like we've been talking about this whole time, make sure we have all the information possible before we make any opinions.
Right.
And moreover, if it's just an opinion thing, whether it be, I think that shirt should be blue, and I think that shirt should be red.
Well, check your own biases, right? We all have biases. So before I'm like making a judgment on this aspect of what somebody said or did, like, what is my bias? What is the truth? Educate myself about the full situation, you know? And also like the degree of what happened to like the consequence, because yes, people should be held accountable. And also if you're in a position where you're influencing and you're even here, right? Like even as like Susan being the CEO, she's held to a standard, right? Of like, you know, and she holds herself to that standard too. But we have to look at like what the mistake or the error is and not like jump on impulse of like just canceling somebody out before we find out like the full facts, the full truth, and then understanding, okay, this may be a consequence to meet this error or whatever, but it doesn't have to be this like crazy thing where you're never allowed to be like this or that or whatever.
Yeah.
Like
Power meets responsibility, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, the more power you have, you got to be obviously aware of that.
But we're also human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was what I was going to say. You got to realize that you don't get like another life. You don't get more powerful. You don't develop superpowers.
right.
You just have maybe certain skills that have afforded you to have a better life. But that doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes. It doesn't mean you're not going to be invulnerable, you
Right.
know? So like I think it's important it has to go by case. I mean,
But
at the end of the day.
and I also think people put people on such a high pedestal that it creates such pressure. And this is why when you think of cancel culture, we go to
That
celebrities.
too.
Because there's so much pressure on people. Like we see it all the time. Like when people are in the spotlight, because anyone even in that has a higher position is in the spotlight more than
Oh
the
my God,
average
my
person.
favorite singer's a Republican. Yeah, it's all over the place. It's just like, bro, what does that do with
That's
anything,
true.
dude? I see it on Twitter. I mean, I love Twitter. I'm not gonna lie. It's an absolute cesspool for hate, but
Twitter is
it's
insane.
hilarious. I'm one of those people too. Like I enjoy kind of hatred somewhat, like in funny and comedy,
Yeah.
because that's the funniest stuff
Like
sometimes.
roasting, like-
yeah,
Yeah,
like
It's fun.
true like emotion and hatred sometimes can be the funniest. It is what it is. I'm not telling people to be hateful or go tell people to whatever, but
Yeah.
it's just being truthful, to
But
be honest.
reading it is funny.
Yeah.
Like when I see somebody like expressing, I there's this guy on, on I think it's on Instagram or TikTok, whatever it is. But he pretends he goes on Facebook and like when he sees this weird person just put a negative review on something, or like, oh, I didn't think you guys should take a stand on this because it's not right or whatever. Literally, he'll go pretending to be the company and be like, well, ma'am, we are understanding your arguments, but we just don't like you, so we're just gonna ban you. And then their response is always the funniest thing. Oh, you guys should be more responsible. You guys should be more respectful. Whatever. Like, ma'am, this is the joke. You have been pranked.
Yeah.
It's like people react too fast, and I think people just need to take a second to just pause and understand that, hey, maybe I don't have all the facts, and that's okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And why do I feel this way?
And why do I feel this way?
Why do I feel this way? What is so impacting me? You know, because you'll grow from it.
Thank you so much for all the support, you know, and if we lost a couple of you because of this episode, hey, we understand. It is what it is. But
we still love you.
But we still love you, and we still respect you, and we still respect your opinion. However, we want to give thanks to everybody who has been liking, who's been sharing, who has been subscribing. We appreciate it all. Please remember to hit the bell so that you can get notified every single time we post a video. We go live we post a video every single Friday at 6 a.m. bright and early. So you guys, you know, whenever you're getting up and going to work, you have us as your company, you know. Please help us reach that 50 subscriber goal. It seems small, but for us it means the world. So we really would appreciate that support in that area. And we're signing off for now. See you next week.
All right. Thank you guys.